Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. This is a very, very important topic because people have teeth. Men, women, that's why I invited everyone. And people want to hold onto them. The thing is with teeth is that, the society tells us that when we get old, that we don't need to have teeth. We hate to use dentures, and that is just not the case. Do you have people old in life who are missing their toes or other limbs? Teeth are a complete limb. They have their own lymphatic system, blood supply, and nerve supply, like any other organ. So they're a complete organ in that way. That means if they get infected or if they're painful, you try to address it at the root cause of disease instead of breaking it or ripping it out like you would do to any other organ. People would never be okay with a doctor saying, the toe's infected, let's take it off. Suddenly, when it comes to the teeth and mouth, it has so much interference. People could have a mouth full of interference by the time they're in their 60s just from going to a dentist so often. And I'm going to explain why there's so much interference when it comes to teeth and what a person could do to avoid dental work and how dental work equals tooth destruction. It's not health. It's not an improvement in how people look. It's not an improvement in how people feel. And it's not an improvement on how people's whole bodies will feel if they have dental work. So the first thing is that the teeth are a periphery. So the body prioritizes central organs. So what causes tooth decay? Tooth decay is caused by eating food that causes a demineralization of the body. 1 teaspoon of sugar demineralizes an adult, not talking about a child, which is going to be much more intense, for 3 days. This is work that Dr. Weston Price, we're going to talk about his work, his student researched 1 teaspoon of sugar for 3 days unhinges the calcium phosphorus balance in the body. And when that happens, people get certain like chronic disease, and also people get tooth decay. So not a lot of sugar. I'm thinking about how many teaspoons are in a cup of Coke, and besides the amount of chemicals. So it means that many people are living in a state of constant demineralization, and that, God forbid, causes cancer, right, and other serious illness. The basic idea is that the tooth pain is basically, it's like any other pain in the body. Basically an email from the body, please eat something different or do something different to get a different result. And that's with most pain, that the body is not defective. Like if someone has an outbreak in their skin is not defective, right? It's just a notification that something is wrong in the person's body. So tooth pain is actually an early warning sign that something is wrong. How else, think about it, person is eating the wrong food. How else does the person get notified from the body that they're eating the wrong food, right? By the time it turns into like stomach pains or much more serious pains, a lot of damage has been done. So the tooth pain is like almost like the early warning sign that a person has to change their diet. And we're going to discuss how do we know that tooth decay, which causes cavities, decay is like when it starts getting soft, the cavity when it's actually like a hole. How do we know that it's caused by food? So there was a dentist 100 years ago called Dr. Weston Price. Now a lot of people heard about him because he's considered like the father of functional nutrition. He was a dentist 100 years ago before they had easy transport. And what happened is that he killed his only son with a root canal treatment. And then him and his wife decided to go around the world to try to discover what causes nice teeth. If what he learned is not the answer, what causes nice teeth? So he has an amazing book with many photos which show very clearly people in isolated communities on what they look like in isolated communities, in the communities within the cities, was that people who ate a totally unprocessed foods diet had beautiful teeth, no contagious diseases like tuberculosis, and fully developed arches, and you saw even skulls of dead people, and their teeth were all intact. They were old people, they died, and their teeth were fine. And this is before people had dentists and were going to dentists. So it's not like the isolated communities had dentists or toothbrushing. This was just diet. And you see complete photos where people have beautiful teeth, old people, young people. And then when you see photos of people in the cities and they started to eat what he calls the modern diet, the modern diet was at that point, we're in the 1920s, just processed flour and processed sugar. Now that sounds like health food compared to what people eat nowadays. Because if people are eating processed food nowadays, it's chemical food. There are just, in the US, could be up to 10,000 untested chemicals in food. So they could say it's just organic applesauce as one ingredient, but they could have another 10,000 chemicals in the food to make it last indefinitely as taste enhancers. And how these chemicals interact with each other is anyone's guess. The point is that nowadays, he must be groveling in his grave, Dr. Price, on what people are eating now as processed food. 100 years ago, people had missing, broken, stained teeth from just eating just processed flour and processed sugar. That's what they were eating. It wasn't industrialized food like it is today with factories. So what does it mean to have processed flour? Processed flour means that even when you're buying your whole spelt, your whole wheat, right, you are eating ultra denatured food. This is what Dr. Price showed, is that when the people started taking out the germ and the bran from the bread, even if you're baking in your own kitchen, your own bread and your own cake, and you're not using sugar, you're eating ultra denatured food, which causes tooth decay. Now I understand this is a massive shock, and it was to me a couple of years ago when I found out that my whole wheat bread was really unsafe food, because you know, people don't realize that the germ is like the 20 plus vitamins that they need to live, the B vitamins, are in the germ. And what happens is that the flour manufacturers take out the germ, because otherwise the flour would need a refrigeration, wouldn't last more than 30 days. So they want it to last indefinitely. So first of all, besides that, they completely take out all the vitamins and add back some of it by law, synthetic version. They also add, commercial flour is very toxic nowadays. They also add chemicals to prevent like infestation, like you have flour factory workers who get weird cancers because of the chemicals they're putting in the flour. So the flour is like so dead, like nothing wants to grow in it, you know? So that's like what people are eating. And what's sad is that bread is the basis of sustenance. And like intuitively, so many people say, oh, they stay away from bread. And they're making a smart move, because modern bread is corrupted bread. And intuitively, they feel like bloated, gain weight. And yes, it causes leaky gut, autoimmune disease, because it's not bread. It has to be fermented for it to be digestible. So a lot of people are into this sourdough thing because it feels comfortable in their stomach. Yes, it makes it digestible, the sourdough aspect, but they're not getting their vitamins. They could still be getting tooth decay if they're eating denatured flour that has been fermented. So the most important thing to walk out of this talk is that a person's flour is their basis of life. And a grain mill is not a big deal. It sits on the counter, has 2 stones inside. You pour your flour in, you press a button, your flour comes out, it's fresh, you have the vitamins you need to live. So he found, Dr. Price, that people were eating denatured flour and processed sugar. Now, I've seen in Florida what a sugar plant looks like. I'm sure if I was juicing it myself, it was actually in our backyard, I never touched it, but I'm sure if I juiced it, I didn't have machinery, it's like very tough stuff that I could juice the stalk. I'm sure I would add a little bit to a fruit shake, I'm sure it would be okay. The problem is the processing. You see, commercial processing could take something beneficial or harmless and turn it so toxic. And that's what processed sugar is. I'm not familiar exactly with the processing, but the end product really demineralizes the person. I don't think the plant is as it would be as harmful if someone had it in their backyard and had a way to juice it and could add it to things. I think it wouldn't be so bad. It's like, give you an example with the coca plant. So the coca plant is a harmless plant in South America that people use it for seasickness, and it's like coffee. It has maybe 1% cocaine in it. And what does the whole cocaine industry do? They copy the cocaine alkaloid, which is a very active component within the plant. They copy it in a synthetic version in a laboratory, and then it's 100% cocaine, the drug. And we know that's very dangerous. So when that's an example, that's an extreme level of processing, because they're extracting an alkaloid. I mean, this is like kind of in the realm of why drugs are so dangerous, even if they're inspired by plants. The example is like with cocaine, is when they make an extraction, copy in a laboratory, make it synthetic, and that's all people are using. But just to show you that processing could be so dangerous, when the locals use coca plant like people use coffee, and they just make a tea. So that's just when it comes to sugar. So Dr. Price showed this with his photos, and there's really nothing to talk more about the topic after you see his hundreds of photos, and you see people in like, you know, extreme areas, let's say in Switzerland, and they're totally isolated, and their teeth are beautiful. And then you go to the cities and see young people with missing, cracked, stained teeth. He went dark-skinned people, light-skinned people, all sorts of nationalities, and you see it very clearly what people look like and what they ate and what they look like. Now, he had another student, Dr. Steinman, who researched the impact of sugar on the teeth, even if it doesn't touch the teeth. So he injected sugar into the post-digestive aspects of the stomach in animals, and he saw they had serious tooth decay.
What?
That is just wild. You can look up Dr. Steinman's studies, Dr. Ralph Steinman's studies. It's like, it's mind-blowing. It shows you how toothbrushing has no impact on tooth decay at all. Just like washing someone's face has no impact on nice skin. It's a systemic cause and a systemic healing when someone's, you know, teeth are hurting them. Brushing all day is not going to help. There's like they discussed that when like there's this dentinal fluid that has to be regenerate the teeth, and these things get interrupted when people are demineralized, so the teeth are just not getting the minerals that they need. He also actually injected sugar into the muscle, forget about the stomach, and also saw tooth decay. So after these studies, it's so clear that it's really only diet. But then again, that's how a person works. You know, a person could, God forbid, get serious illness on so many different parts of the body that have nothing to do with the teeth, that all based on diet. That's how a person poisons themselves or nourishes themselves. So food is either medicine or poison. There's really nothing in between. I don't mean to sound extreme, but there's nothing in between. Because the body is processing what's coming into the body, it has to go somewhere. Either it's nourishing the person or it's poisoning the person. And even something like, let's say, blueberries, let's say it's someone's favorite food, and they eat it every day, they're going to poison themselves. That's what's going to happen. Meaning, like I'm trying to show how there's no middle ground here. If a person floods themselves with plant nutrients and the person doesn't need so much of that plant nutrient, besides that they're probably going to cause a food sensitivity, it becomes a poison. Where you understand too much water is going to cause an electrolyte imbalance, right? Too much of a food is going to cause a food sensitivity. Person really needs to understand that what they put in their mouth is really a matter of life and death, not just tooth decay. So this is Dr. Weston Price's findings. And he did more research. He actually fed children who had serious tooth decay certain foods to see if their tooth decay would heal and if their cavities would fill up. So not only does the soft part, can it harden, like as strong as the tooth, but the holes could actually fill up by itself. Basically, this is really a concept when it comes to whole body health. Just like the body could create an internal tear, could create so many problems, a cyst, a tumor. The body could undo it if the conditions that caused that problem change. Just like a body will dismantle those health problems or undo it once the person changes what caused the original health problem. So this is what Dr. Weston Price did. He was very big on animal products that are from grass-fed animals only. He found that didn't have the benefits the non-grass-fed. They're very problematic non-grass-fed animals anyway, for different reasons, with the wrong ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. But what he found is that when he fed these kids vitamin K2, chicken liver, grass-fed chicken liver, or animal livers, or organ meats he was big on, I would say from reading all the stuff he fed people, liver is considered like a really healthy food. And I know a lot of us didn't grow up on it, but if you could grind it and eat like at a medicinal dose, like a tablespoon, if someone has tooth decay for like 2-3 weeks, I would say that's like serious healing, considering the Dr. Weston Price's work. Now that's his own work. There were other researchers who explored the diets of people from South America, and they weren't very big necessarily in animals, and they were very big on things like corn and grains and zucchini, and it was the same story. It was the people who had a totally unprocessed foods diet, beautiful teeth. The people who ate processed food had really bad teeth. And this was not using the fat soluble vitamins. So, it's Dr. Weston Price is big, and he thinks it's the only way when it comes to fat soluble vitamins from animal fats, from grass-fed animals, but it's not the only way seeing what other researchers did when it came to South Americans who were not big on animal products. And that seems intuitive because different parts of the world have access to different foods, right? Some people have access to fish. I mean, now the world's 100 years later, it's very poison to eat fish. It really depends where you're getting it from. There's tons of mercury coming from smokestacks and, manufacturers in the Far East, and ends up going into the entire world. So you don't want to take in tons of metal just because you're having omega-3 fatty acids from your fish. So 100 years ago, the world was a lot less industrialized, and it was a lot less poisoned, and they weren't using glyphosate and super toxic sprays, and these runoffs get into everywhere. So the world is being destroyed. I mean, there's a percentage of animals that don't exist anymore, since they like small animals, but then the bigger animals. I recommend reading a book called Toxic Legacy by Dr. Senef. She talks about how glyphosate, used to see little critters running around in springtime. You just don't because of glyphosate. And then she talks about whole categories of animals. There's just in Silent Spring, which was talking about DDT, but this is way before my time. That when then DDT is like outlawed and it's a big topic. But nowadays the big topic is glyphosate. So she was saying that this book is hopefully going to be like the Silent Spring book, where she was saying it's like Silent Spring when they were spraying DDT and you didn't hear any animals and they're damaging the ozone layer, and now they stopped spraying it. But so the point is that I'm saying unprocessed food is healthy wherever you are. We live in a very toxic world 100 years later, so it's not really like that nowadays. Now you have to be really careful about your food sources. You can't just take fish because unprocessed and eat it. You could be eating tons of metal. 100 years ago, wherever people were, they were eating unprocessed food, they were good. Now you could be eating unprocessed food, you could be eating very toxic food, just because of the poisoning of what's going on in the environment. So the way to heal someone's teeth, the first thing is to stay away from God. Before you do, I'm going to make some suggestions on improvements that people could do once they feel like their tooth is hurting them, right? What are signs of someone's tooth is hurting them? Sensitivity to cold, hot, or sweet food, right? That's a notification that something's wrong with the tooth. A person could also get, for like $5 on Amazon, orthodontic mirrors or mouth mirrors, and they put one mirror in their mouth and they could look in the mirror and they could literally identify. They don't need a third party to sit inside their head. It's very intrusive if you think about it. It's like internal part of a person's body to identify for themselves what's going on in their mouth. You just take a strong light, like a gooseneck lamp, and you could shine it into your mouth and see what's going on. So it could be a person will actually see signs of, like even a hole is like extreme decay. and sometimes that doesn't hurt. So checking out a person's own teeth, usually people feel like a sensitivity when something is bothering them. So the first thing to do is to make sure a person's not eating any processed food. That's the first thing. Well, processed food nowadays is really chemical food. It's so much worse than denatured food. So that means anything that comes from a factory that has a shiny package that tells you more than one ingredient is totally inedible. I'm sorry. It's so disappointing to hear. The cereals cause cancer, the granola bars. I mean, this stuff is a one-way trip towards serious degenerative disease, not just tooth decay. Okay, so anything processed is just totally not fit for consumption. We have nothing in my house that is processed. Nothing. I get organic sweet potato, I get brown rice, I get grass-fed lamb. I mean, I'm not buying anything that someone assembled for me in a factory. I'll get oat groats, that's the whole oat. I'll get whole spelt, they're called spelt berries, that I mill it into flour, make delicious cake and bread every day. So we're not shying away from complex foods, but those complex foods are made in my own kitchen. That's how it goes. I don't get even spices that are assembled. I'm trying to get minimally processed, spices are medicinal if they're minimally processed. Or you just get the dry herb as much as I can. I'll get cilantro, dill, parsley, fresh, and then freeze it so I can use it on demand. That's not processed at all. That's just a fresh, that's like a spice that hasn't even been dried. So for sure not even in the, they sell a mix of spices, they'll add crazy stuff, even aluminum to prevent anti-caking and crazy ingredients. You wouldn't believe what's even in a mixed spice thing. The main thing is that it's a product that sells. Your health is just really not the priority when it comes to a product for sale. You know, it was shocking for me when it hit me that somebody could poison their own produce. Let's say they're selling broccoli, but they'll spray it with so much glyphosate that it causes cancer instead of preventing cancer. Why would someone damage their produce? And now, of course, they understand, because otherwise their produce will be eaten by worms or whatever, and they're not doing, permaculture with their soil to prevent those insects to begin with. Because if someone does that, they won't have an insect problem, if they manage their soil properly. So, in this way, they don't care that your end product is unsafe. They'll add these chemicals that make it so tasty for taste enhancers that make it that people just want to buy the product again, or that it's so good. So it's really a person has to educate themselves in this area. So number one is no processed food. Not buying a bag of flour from a store is buying ultra processed chemical food. So that's what we're trying to establish here. And once a person stays away from processed sugar, processed flour, all processed food, they when they're buying these organic grains, rice and quinoa, and they're just buying it raw and organic, they can't even just boil it with water. They gotta soak it first. That's a very important step for health and also to prevent tooth decay. Because what happens is that if a person boils their grain, without soaking it, these grains and seeds and nuts and beans have some coating to prevent animals and insects from eating it. It's like self-preservation, phytates or anti-nutrients, whatever it is, and they have a very bad effect on the gut and block nutrient absorption. So a person could be thinking they're eating their whole grains and they're consuming B vitamins and they're eating their sesame seeds, but the sesame seed will just travel through the body. They don't soak it for the 4 hours. So a person needs to soak this stuff before use. They each have their own list and rules. There's a website on Dr. Josh Axe's website. You could just search sprouting. He has literally a list of every single seed, bean, Dr. Josh Axe 8XE. And you end up getting the hang of it. That the beans are, 18 to 24 hours. The grains are basically 8 to 12. The seeds are 4. Pumpkin seeds are 8, by the way. They're a lot. But they have this coating that make it that it's not digestible. So that's just really important for someone to make sure that they're taking in the vitamins that they're even eating. Very important step. Is this new to people? The soaking? Mm-hmm. New, okay. Yeah, it was new to me at one point also. But once you start, there's no going back. First of all, soaking starts a cooking process on like an enzyme level. So you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. It's considered a form of cooking, just soaking your quinoa. There's something happening, something's being broken down. So without heat and without a fire. So just to give you an example, that's actually a form of cooking. Also, the cooking time is much faster. So when you're cooking your rice, you also need less water. It becomes, instead of 2 cups of water to 1 cup of rice, it's 1-to-1 ratio. Same thing with quinoa. You end up needing a lot less water. The grains end up getting much bigger. These microorganisms are inactive on grain. They become like alive and active, and they do tremendous work on the grain. They break down these phytic acids. They probably turn them into amino acids. Who knows what they do? That's what they do to the grain when you make sourdough. You do all sorts of things. They multiply the nutritional content. They don't only make it digestible. They do a whole bunch of very nutritious things to the grain. So that's the second thing to keep in mind when you want to eat the right food. Then the question is, what type of sweeteners could you eat? Because of course people want to eat sweet food. So we're talking about unprocessed food, and that would mean honey. And I'm not talking about honey that you could squeeze from a tiny hole, because honey that you could squeeze from a tiny hole means that they boiled it, they strained it. That is not honey. Honey is like the honey that I get that has a 4 or 5 inch mouth opening, that if you turn it upside down, it doesn't spill. You need a hard metal spoon to scoop it out. That is totally unprocessed honey. And another unprocessed sweetener would be pure stevia. Stevia is a plant leaf. I'm not talking about stevia from a supermarket. See, supermarkets don't sell food. They sell toxins and poisons. Regular supermarkets, every single thing. You think you're eating shredded coconut, but it's been bleached and they have sulfites, and they just add so many different things to it. There's not even one thing in a normal supermarket besides the clear disposable tablecloths. I mean, what else are you supposed to get in a supermarket that is, the cleansers are dangerous, and we can explain how they also cause tooth decay, cleansers, because they cause leaky gut, and they mess up the endocrine system, so then the body doesn't have a calcium phosphorus balance. So chemicals are a very big topic that we're going to have to mention if we have time. We have to mention chemicals, but I'm not talking about stevia from a supermarket at all. It's going to be white, it's going to be bleached, they'll be mixing it in with other alcohols like they do to any other thing that has some source in nature. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about getting stevia from an herbal shop. It's green. It's just the ground up leaf into a powder. Now, I personally don't like the taste. It happens to be 160 times the strength of sugar. It's very powerful. It's almost like if you get a packet, it'll last you a lifetime. You use a pinch, you have to use the amount that you're not even sure you put something in. That's how strong it is. You start breathing it in, you like feel like you ate something so sweet. It's like insanely sweet. It happens to be very good for diabetics because it actually helps with, blood sugar levels. It's like medicinal if you're getting in the green ground herb form, but it has a very distinct taste. I personally don't have a great use for it. Some people may like it. But honey, I have a very good use for. And once you start mixing with cocoa, it literally tastes like chocolate. Like, I'm not huge on the plain honey taste, like honey cake and honey cookies. But when you mix honey in your baking, you cannot tell that honey is the sweetening source. There's just no way to tell. You have vanilla, you have other ingredients. It is much sweeter than sugar, so it's not a 1-to-1 replacement. There are actually 4 changes to every recipe. When you make that swap, you take your banana cake and you change it from sugar, you can't just swap out your sugar. There are 4 changes that have to make, and I'll mention them very quickly. One is that sugar is much sweeter, so either you're switching for every 1 cup of sugar, it's half to 2/3 of a cup of honey. That's number 1. So you just do the math. If you have 2 cups of sugar in your recipe, you're going to do either 1 cup or 1 1/3 cups. You just depends how sweet you want your food to be, right? You decide the swap, half to 2/3 of a cup. Number 2, you're adding a certain amount of liquid to your recipe because sugar is solid. So for every 1 cup of sugar, you have to take away 1/4 cup of liquid from somewhere in the recipe. So if you're gonna take out your oil, it's not gonna be as rich, your cake. Like, you have to get smart about where you're taking your liquids from. Some people don't take out all liquids, but that's really what you're supposed to do. Also, for every 1 cup of honey, you need to add I think it's 1/4 teaspoon, it's not 100%, I think it's 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. You need to add to whatever baking soda you're adding in the recipe, because it's very dense, honey, to make the cake less dense. And the 4th one would be, you need to cook it on a totally different temperature. I don't cook cakes that have honey in it anything more than 275 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like 135 degrees Celsius. That's like my neck. They burn. It just will burn. Sugar is a whole different thing. 350 cakes is a thing from like a very long time ago for me. I never bake cake on 350, unless it's like a kakash cake that's on a very high temperature, because I use, for Shabbos once a week, I'll make the kakash cake with pure maple syrup. Now, pure maple syrup, I'll just use for this once a week, but they're boiling it. I get organic, and I try to get it on a list that's formaldehyde free, because otherwise they keep the hole in the tree open with formaldehyde. It's like unbelievable how there's so many toxins to try to stay away from. But that I'm able to cook on when you're making a sourdough kakash cake. It's a fermented cake. It's a very high temperature. And that's the exception. But these honey cakes the honey in the cake makes it on a very low temperature. So that's how to use a sweetener in food. And then in terms of foods that could heal cavities, besides Dr. Weston Price's ideas on eating, let's say, something like grass-fed liver, eating fermented vegetables in general is a very, very healing modality. Fermented vegetables. What is a fermented vegetable? Fermented vegetable is basically taking any fruit or vegetable, have also these inactive microorganisms, and once you put it under water, talking about chlorine-free water, chlorine will kill these microorganisms. So you want chlorine-free water. And you add, it's about 3% salt to the weight of the vegetables. You get used to the measurements, and this glass jar is this amount of tablespoons of, I don't weigh vegetables ever nowadays. You do it a couple times, then you know how much how much salt it ends up, that jar it takes. But you're just putting in salt, and we're not talking about bleach white salt that has aluminum. We're talking about pink salt. We're talking about Great Celtic salt. Great Celtic salt is really good for pickling. It's really strong and coarse and has tons of minerals. So white table salt is also one of these ultra processed stuff where the supermarket takes a product that is necessary for survival, like salt, which has minerals that people need to live, and is necessary for water intake in the body on the cellular level, and takes out all the minerals, bleaches it, adds aluminum that it should pour nicely and never cake up. Turns into a really toxic. Like, I would rather avoid the white table salt than salt my food if I was at someone's table. Like, I don't recommend adding anything to any food. We're not eating chemical infant formula in food. We eat food the way it comes. We don't alter it. We don't start adding back vitamins. So that you add the salt, and then that's the concept of fermentation. Salt and water. After 5 to 7 days, you're going to have sour food, and they needed this years ago, before refrigeration, for the fruits and vegetables to last. And nowadays, our gut health needs us to live. Just because we have a refrigerator doesn't mean people could last in good health for a lifetime without eating these foods. These are foods people were meant to eat because they needed it for survival. They wouldn't have had the food otherwise. But just because we have a refrigerator doesn't mean we beat the system and now our bodies are good. We don't need fermented vegetables. Fermented vegetables are necessary to prevent degenerative disease. These microorganisms they outnumber human cells 10 to 1. Now, the reason we don't look like a bacteria or something is because they are just so tiny. But they get damaged, for sure, by antibiotics, which are deadly. Antibiotics are completely deadly, cause psychosis, degenerative disease, mental illness, gut issues, and there are many herbs for infection. But besides antibiotics, it's like swallowing an atomic bomb, are these microorganisms, and they don't necessarily grow back. the heavy metals, toxins, they alter the composition in the body. So a person needs to eat these fermented vegetables in order to live. So the way to make it tasty, there are all sorts of tricks, and I have a lot of fish on my website with recipes, but just to throw out a few tricks right now, if you add your salt and water and keep it totally submerged, that's a key. It's submerged. Once it starts floating, it gets moldy and it's garbage. So there are ways to keep it submerged. I use a stack of bay leaves, and I'll explain why I use bay leaves. I just put up some cut up cabbage, and the bay leaves are too small to keep the cabbage down. So I put a full cabbage leaf, like suction it in to keep everything down. People use glass weights. I've tried huge, like stainless springs to like keep the vegetables down. I found that wasn't that great. I also tried glass weights. I wasn't so happy. I find that either with the leaves or the huge cabbage leaf, that keeps the vegetables down. And I check on it to make sure nothing's floating, because otherwise I won't have stuff won't get to where it needs to go. If it has a thin film of this white weird stuff, that's yeast. You could clean that off. You add a little water, you just scoop it out, your stuff is fine. But it's the mold that's the problem, not the yeast. I mean, the yeast doesn't make it not so tasty. You just have to get rid of it if you see that growing on top of the waterline. So that's fermented vegetables. The bay leaves we add because it has tannins in it, like a lot of plants have something called tannins, and that makes the vegetables crunchy. So that's really important because you're soaking your stuff at the end of the day. You don't want soggy stuff. So you do want to put in a generous amount of bay leaves. Besides that, it's a delicious taste. It has a very subtle pickling spice effect. So you want to add the bay leaves. So I would say bay leaves and salt is essential. And then if you add garlic, it makes it very tasty and very medicinal. Garlic is probably the most medicinal element on earth. That's right, in my opinion. And when you ferment it, it's for sure the most medicinal food you eat. So I definitely ferment garlic, but I ferment it for more than 1 week. We almost fermented ours for like a month. I think that was too much. I think 2 to 3 weeks is probably ideal. And then I hide it from my family in food, like by crushing and putting it into a salad, and then no one knows what they're eating. It sounds like pickle, something, they're not sure. Because plain is, unless you're really serious about eating food for prevention medicine, it's not like so tasty to eat like a pickled fermented garlic, even though people could love it. I pickle it like a pickle, but you could hide it in salad.
It doesn't even taste like
I'm going to deal with the questions at the end. And then, so it's basically bay leaves, the garlic, the salt, and then people add pickling spices. Pickling spices are a blend and a recipe of, and then you could look it up, of whole black pepper, whole dill, different spices to make it very tasty. But that's preference, and then you can make a pickle taste like a pickle. But those are not like essential for the recipe. So that's fermented vegetables, and those are really essential for tooth health because they help heal leaky gut. And what could really cause tooth issues is when there's holes in the gut lining from chemicals, from metals, from eating unfermented gluten, processed cow dairy, processed sugar. Those cause holes in the gut lining. And a person could not be absorbing their nutrients properly by eating food that is nutritious, but they have leaky gut. So they could be getting tooth decay even if their diet is great. So healing leaky gut is really critical for health and also for prevention of any tooth decay. Let me explain that again. Yeah, the regular diet and chemicals, that like standard American diet or whatever, the unfermented gluten, the processed dairy, the sugar, the chemicals, the stuff in the environment that we're breathing in, these toxins, the heavy metals, they cause leaky gut. When people are eating, let's say, good food afterwards, and they're trying to heal themselves, they could be adding good food to a situation, but the stomach has holes in it, and then the body can't absorb it properly. So we have to kind of patch up the holes, and the way to do that is with fermented vegetables. Another way to heal leaky gut is with bone broth. That's also a very healing food and also directly healing for teeth, where a person takes a bunch of grass-fed bones, throws it into their crock pot, adds, let's say, 1/4 cup of, or 2-3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar into their water with their bones, and it draws out the minerals in the bones. And this is just a very healing You could add a very healing food. It helps heal leaky gut. These minerals are also very good for teeth. The way to eat it, people eat it plain, they throw in their vegetables. I store it in just glass jars in the fridge. I add it to the vegetable soup, because like I'll warm up the vegetable soup and then add a bunch of beans or quinoa or other grains to make it filling. By then already the pot doesn't have the liquid, because the vegetables, after all those grains, adding it to the pot of soup. So then I'll throw in a whole bunch of bone broth, so it's like a liquidy soup, and it's like served like a soup. So then that way it's just a great thing to have. A lot of people also just like use it as a cooking liquid. They're making rice, they'll use bone broth like as a substitute for water. And those minerals are not going to get boiled out with heat, and they'll stay in the food. That's how some people use it. They just cook with it, as long as the water is being absorbed in the food and not like straining it out. So that's another healing thing for, tooth decay and leaky gut. This is a very, very long topic. We didn't address so many different things, like what's wrong with the things that dentists put in their teeth, put in people's mouths. Maybe we should do a part 2. But I'm just gonna wrap up on what people do if they actually have tooth decay. Going to dentist is not the answer. Okay, I'll explain for a couple reasons why that's not the answer. It's gonna be hard to go into every single last dentistry thing. No, it's a very big topic, how dangerous root canals are, how dangerous silver fillings are, to make people aware that if they have these things in their mouth, they must remove them. It's a life and death matter, like certain forms of toxic dentistry. But the way to heal the teeth is to also stay away from chemicals. You see, chemicals and toxins that people use as body products, like, the shampoo, the soap, the cleansers. If you read the ingredients, if you wouldn't drink it or eat it, you shouldn't breathe in it or put on your skin. They're usually a blend of carcinogens, endocrine disruptors, and respiratory disruptors. They're usually all three if you start Googling what these chemicals are. And because we're going to talk about the aspect of the endocrine disruptors that messes up the calcium phosphorus balance in the body, which makes it that a person get tooth decay because the pancreas is not processing this balance properly, which makes it that the person's teeth are not getting what they need. So they directly affect the teeth in this way. And also in a secondary way, they also cause leaky gut. So that way there's holes in the gut lining, and the person's eating nutrients, and then the nutrients are not being absorbed. So this is the way to try to have nice teeth. And if someone has tooth pain, to go back to these steps, to take out away foods that could be causing, like even something like puffed grain, which people could think is just one ingredient. It's just puffed organic, let's say rice cake, organic rice cake. The fact that they're puffing it on very high temperatures is ultra denatured food. Of course, it's going to be healthier than something that has dyes and chemicals and other toxins, but it's very bad for the teeth and the whole body. Okay, so I'm going to talk for like a couple of minutes just that I mentioned about how toxic what the dentist does to people's heads, the interference, and how dangerous it is, and people should get this stuff out of their kids' mouths or their own mouths that we're put in. First of all, if someone has tooth pain, putting on clove essential oil or peppermint essential oil could help temporarily till they address it at the root cause with diet. Someone has a tooth infection, they could put manuka oil or rinse with very salty water multiple times a day. Even if they have like a blown up abscess on the gum, to rinse with very salty water that the infection goes down and will go away. A lot of dentists, even holistic dentists, will try to pull out the person's tooth if there's an infection. That's really just because an implant is thousands of dollars and they want to be able to put a fake tooth into someone's head. That's just sadly the only reason, because an abscess is not a good reason to pull out a tooth. What's a good reason to pull out a tooth? If a person has a root canal done to their tooth. A root canal, I'm going to talk about some of the most toxic stuff that dentists do, in order of how dangerous. The most dangerous thing that the dentist does, and I know people think I'm going to talk about silver fillings first, because silver fillings are half mercury, but they're really number 2. Number 1 is a root canal, because I'm finishing up a 300-page book now on how dangerous dentists are. So the amount of research I've read and the cases of the extent of the illnesses that could happen from a root canal they just range from cancer to food sensitivities. But it's like literally hearing problems. It just doesn't end. And the reason for it is, there are a couple of reasons for it. What's happening in a root canal is that a person comes to a dentist and they'll say that the tooth is hurting them. How does a conventional trained doctor, it's really what dentists are, they're conventionally trained doctor for teeth. What do they do if they say that something's hurting them? They don't know how to address the root cause. They get them out of pain by breaking the tooth, by destroying the tooth. They core out the tooth like an apple. Like literally, you can watch on YouTube. It's not for the faint-hearted on the process of a root canal. They're coring out the whole tooth. Then they get the center of the nerves above the gum line, but they want to get the nerves below the gum line. So they'll stick these metal files into the pulp part of the tooth below the gum line into the roots. So they of course they're going way past the tooth sometimes or not deep enough. Then they pour the most toxic mixture ever into the tooth. Why? For a number of reasons. One is because they want to mummify the tooth so it doesn't kind of fall apart in the body because it's dead by now, because they destroyed the nerve supply and blood supply of the tooth to be able to get nourishment, right? So they don't want it to fall apart because they want the shell of the tooth to stay. So they put in formaldehyde, which is like an embalming agent and a carcinogen, but they also mix in metals or other toxins that are always going to be visible on an x-ray, because they end up, for some reason, x-raying the person many times during the root canal treatment, because they want to make sure that they were able to get rid of all the nerves and that the stuff that they put into the roots actually went down all the way into the roots. So they'll file it down. Sometimes their files, a percentage of the time, get stuck and break into the root of the tooth, because it's not supposed to happen with the files, but because they want to save money and they sterilize these files, they become very easy to break. They're only meant to be reused. So there's a percentage of the time that they'll break inside and the person has the file stuck inside their tooth. So when someone says that they have the prep, see, they're very pleasant terms, the dentistry terms. They're for the most barbaric of stuff. They prep the tooth. Sounds like you're prepping something I don't know, prepping your cake, or it just sounds it's also like a productive thing. They prep the tooth. You know what prep the tooth means? It means they destroyed I'll have someone contact me. They already prepped the tooth for the root canal. What should they do from here? They heard root canals are bad. Should they go back to the second treatment? I was like, I don't know what to advise you. At this point, they probably killed the whole tooth. And what they do now is they just keep making sure the tooth is fully dead before they seal it and plug it up with their stuff. The prep is the complete coring out and destruction of the tooth. So that's the root canal. The reason it's so dangerous, it doesn't sound like it should be so dangerous because it's still the body part. Even if they pull out all the dangerous filler, what's most dangerous about it is that it's a dead tissue stuck in the head. So what happens is that these anaerobic bacteria start growing, and their endotoxins that they create spread throughout the body. And this stuff is measurable and testable. Now, I'm not big on bacteria causing disease, and a living person, a person knows how to deal with the environment. But we're talking about a dead tooth. So these endotoxins become very toxic. They cause systemic infection. They just literally, the tooth does not belong in the body. And the body has so many different ways of saying, the body can't pull out the tooth, or maybe it can make it fall out somehow, I don't know. But the only way to disease is that notification that the body is in a situation that something has to be changed. So the root canal is the most serious thing that the dentist does. And if someone has a root canal, they really need to remove it. The way to remove a tooth, I'm just going to say very quickly, is with a dentist that doesn't just pull it out, because that's very jarring to the whole jawbone, but with something like a rocking motion in pieces, it doesn't cause trauma to the whole jawbone. And then what's really important is to clean out the whole socket, the whole jawbone. It's a hole in the bone. It must be cleaned out from something called a ligament. The ligament is like the sock. If this is the root of a tooth, there's a mesh, a sock. Before it goes into the bone, it's miraculous. The teeth have a trampoline effect. When you chew, there's give. When people have fake teeth, there's no give. It's a hard substance in the hard bone. This trampoline effect is the ligament. That ligament must come out with the tooth. It needs to be cleaned up probably from someone experienced, so that way the bone can heal nicely, and of course the gum line ends up healing. But below the gum line, the bone has to heal. And if this ligament is not removed, it could cause something called a cavitation. Like if people have their wisdom teeth pulled, people should not pull out their wisdom teeth. But if people pull out their wisdom teeth without doing this, cavitations are their own health problems. They're like smoldering infection from jawbone that hasn't been healed. It becomes like a mesh. The bone doesn't heal properly. It could cause its own health problems. And if someone had that, they need to clean out their jawbone even many years later. So it's not a simple thing to pull it to. A person has to be very experienced. The next most very dangerous thing that a dentist does, very quickly, we'll wrap up in like 3 minutes.
Implants?
Implants, I would say number 3. But number 2 is going to be metal silver fillings, because they're half mercury by weight. They're not silver. They could be maybe 8-10% silver. They're mostly mercury. So what happens is that with every bite of hot and cold food, measurable amounts of mercury vapors are released into the head, which they're totally trackable and measurable. And they cause the obvious of what mercury poisoning would cause, which is mental health problems, dementia, Alzheimer's, and then they cause cancers. Like if you listen to Dr. Gerson's books, he says he's hardly met a cancer patient who doesn't have a silver filling or root canal. It's like the first thing he recommends before he does any holistic treatment on them. Digestive issues. Trying to think of like the classic, the kidney failure and kidney issues, skin problems. I would say the top 5 are mental health, kidney, gut, cancer with the silver filling, infertility, birth defects. I don't know, these are very common of what they cause, because mercury has no place in the human body. It's toxic in minute amounts. They have so many rules and regulations, the environment, like the government, on what to do with these extracted fillings. The joke is that the only safe place for the metal fillings is in someone's head, because once it's removed, there's so many rules. But only in someone's head it's safe. Like that's a safe place to park it. And the sad thing is that in Europe it was outlawed, and in the U.S. it's totally available. And they say, because otherwise the AD is afraid of tons of lawsuits. So they say don't put in kids' mouths now, and don't put in pregnant women. I guess you're allowed to poison men, and it's very sad. I was just dealing on Shabbos with a girl who has marks on her face. It's very common from people who have silver fillings, lines, not from acne. It's from silver fillings and digestive issues. First question I asked her was, do you have silver fillings? She's like, a couple. It's so sad. There's even one pit filling. A pill filling is like a small filling, could cause so many problems, and it really depends on the person. Some people could handle toxins better than other people, so it's not a good thing to say. It's not a good question to say, how come this person has 5 silver fillings and they're in good health, and this person has 1 silver fillings and they can't get out of bed? It's different people handle toxins differently. The main point is that this stuff is toxic. A person should go to a special dentist called an IAOMT.org certified dentist. They learn how to remove the silver filling without poisoning the person's mercury on the way out, because removal has a lot of mercury. You put a rubber bit down, you can make sure the person does the checklist. Try to find a dentist that does it without an x-ray and that does it without removing any more of the tooth material. Because a lot of dentists will say, hey, this is decay, we have to drill. No. Maximum use a manual scraper to scrape at anything soft. Soft teeth are body parts. They're not trash, they're not something that gets suctioned up. You could find a dentist in Mexico that they're less afraid of losing their license, and they'll work with the patient. The patient is the customer. They say what they want, they'll do what they want, and they're also IAOMT certified. So that's my recommendation, to even fly to avoid an x-ray, because the x-rays cause the cells to become free radical. They don't necessarily bounce back after the radiation finishes passing through. There's no safe threshold for radiation. And when they start saying that the sun is like an x-ray machine, that is just the radiation machine industry pushing this really a sick lie to equate the sun, the healing rays of the sun, that we can't survive without the sun, right? It activates vitamins within the body. Person cannot survive without the sun. And telling them that it's like taking, they come up with all these crazy stuff. It's like taking a flight to, LA from New York, dental x-rays. They come up with all these things because people are not comfortable with it, but they're just complete lies. They're not based on reality. So find a dentist. Don't get poisoned to get unpoisoned. Don't poison yourself with x-rays in order to remove your mercury fillings. Find a dentist who will do it without it, and there are dentists who will. The third most toxic thing is the implant. The implant is a fake tooth that is screwed into the jawbone. The worst implants are the titanium. The titanium ions cause the bone to break down. The ions, see, bone is constantly breaking down and replenishing itself, but titanium metal causes a faster ratio of the breakdown than the replenishment. So I have people who contact me saying they have loose teeth. That must be like the most terrifying thing on earth. They literally have loose molars in their head. And I asked them some questions. I asked them, first of all, did they ever have a tooth pulled that wasn't cleaned out properly? Because a cavitation, like an unhealed jawbone, could cause loose teeth, because the jawbone is not doing well, could cause loose teeth on other teeth. And do you have any titanium posts in your jaw? And usually the answer, I mean, it's always been one or the other or both. And either the, let's say the body rejected the implants, they still have that post sitting in their jawbone, they have to get that post out. That titanium post is totally dangerous. There are less toxic posts, but the bottom line is it's such a foreign thing to the body. It must be a very uncomfortable thing to live with in general. And I just wish we lived in a society that people were comfortable with missing teeth, and people would understand that the missing teeth didn't come from bad care of their teeth. It came from going to a dentist, the dentist destroyed their tooth, and they didn't want to live with the pain of fake stuff on their mouth. That's just what, when I see someone with a missing tooth, I know a dentist, the tooth, they don't wake up one day and the tooth fell out. The dentist either convinced the person or broke so much of it that they couldn't live with the part that was missing. And I wish we lived in a society that it wasn't frowned on, that people would understand that it's not because women didn't brush their teeth that they lost their tooth. So that's the third most toxic. And then there are a whole slew of toxic stuff. I mean, even just a composite filling, composites are more than 50% are just so immune reactive, which would cause chronic face pain, ear pain, neck pain. The body has no way to say, please get this out of the head other than some issue. So the thing with composite is that a person needs to do a blood test before doing any composite, which tests the immune reactivity of the person versus the dental supplies. There's something called a Hal Huggins test, which, I mean, he started this test. It's called Biocomp Labs. There's a Melissa test. There's like 3 companies that do this, where the person sends their blood into this lab, and the lab tests their blood against like 10,000 different dental products, which are basically probably about 40, 50 ingredients. And the person gets a printout list saying which ingredients they're totally reactive to, very reactive, and then they have a list of ingredients that they're less reactive to. There's no such thing as non-reactive, because nothing is non-reactive in the body other than the person's own teeth. So that's a non-category. But if a person's, looking to swap out their silver filling and wants to get composite, they should do this blood testing first so they know which composite the body won't reject. I think that's all there is to say on this, like in a nutshell, but there's so much to say on when people, like all the examples that people have, all the cases that people have asked me, their tooth chipped, what to do, like a back, like I could get into examples but this is the basic idea. If someone has toxic stuff in their mouth, and of course, let's not forget what they do here a lot to kids is those silver caps on teeth. You see them, it's so sad. I mean, it must cause such suffering. Besides, they could cause leukemia. They're mostly nickel. Nickel is like one of the most toxic metals on earth. You would never put nickel on your skin because you'd get a rash immediately. And they put it on people's teeth. There's tons of, forget it's like the same problem of a root canal, because they call it a baby root canal. But then they cap it with this nickel. They call it a stainless steel cap. It's mostly nickel. I know a situation, a boy was in chronic ear pain for 3 years until the mother tried everything before removing the baby tooth with the metal cap, and the ear pain disappeared. Okay, anyone have any questions? I'll try to answer very fast. Just
Yeah,
as I promised.
why is the X-ray on the flight not as bad as when they X-ray your body?
I mean,
that
it's
I
really-
have heard that from for mammogram. She said, if I'd offer you 2 free tickets to America, you would take it. So why are you saying no to mammogram?
It's so hard to deal with these like.
No, but why? No, but why is it not?
Because it's
problem
just
on
like
the
comparing, why is like a front door different to your window? Like, it's just not the same thing. You can't compare solar energy to man-made radiation. It just doesn't pass through the body, cause free radical damage, like
flight? So
ionizing
flight's
radiation.
okay? The flight.
I'm not saying, I don't know. Flights are their own problem because they have these x-ray machines that you have to avoid. You have to say you want pat downs in the US. You only have to go through a metal detector, right? You don't want to get the full body scan. You want to not pull your stuff away. Like in Europe, they'll keep you very far away from pulling out your stuff from the x-ray machine. In the US, you can literally collect your stuff right by where they're x-raying the stuff. In Europe, they'll keep you another like 5-6 feet away. You can't even touch your stuff. You know, if you do stopovers, you see the difference. So yeah, it's just not it's not comparable.
And
One
what your
causes
wisdom to-
causes cancer and one prevents cancer. The sun prevents cancer. The rates of melanoma have gone up since people started applying sunscreen. People started applying sunscreen. The rates of melanoma. The sun prevents cancer. It helps the body function. So one causes cancer, one prevents cancer. I'd say the opposite. One heals the body, one damages the body. That's how I would compare them, as
Never heard of
opposites.
saying about the sun.
I would say they're complete opposites. Yeah.
So what about liver that isn't cut from grass-fed animals?
So according to that, I mean, it's
very hard
harmful.
to find them here.
So here, you actually just need to get animals that are grown, that are raised in Paraguay or Argentina and Uruguay. If you, like, I've searched this on AI Grok, and it said that these places, they are grass-fed and they don't allow hormones and injections. So that's all you
And then
need.
there's a question of kashrus also.
What do you mean? Just go to Osherad and you get in the frozen section, they sell, it says from Uruguay,
Right.
from
Most, it's very.
Argentina. It's all over the place, the South American meat.
But all of it from Uruguay and Argentina are grass-fed?
According to what I've read online, they're outlawed the hormones and injections and they're grass-fed. Grain costs money, so these places have a lot of pasture land. I would stay away from any meat from Brazil because they allow hormones and injections, and they may or may not be grass-fed. And in Israel, they're mostly not grass-fed.
So then somebody should avoid all chicken liver, for example?
Or try to avoid it, but then if you're getting local chicken and it's organic, I would just stick to what you could get. If you get a chicken that's organic here, yeah, it's hard to get perfect in 2026, like, it really is. We can try to get as close as we can to perfect. Any other questions?
What do you say a word on oil pulling? Do you know?
Oil pulling. So oil pulling is a nice way to clean the teeth. Clean teeth is like completely for social reasons only, so food shouldn't get stuck in the teeth. I think a nice way to clean the teeth is with very diluted salt water, like sea salt. You put it in a little container in the bathroom, you put it to the cup of water, you rinse, and then use it as like a way to brush. It whitens the teeth, it cleans the teeth, it helps in potential infection. Oil pulling is good. If anyone has any metal, it will draw the mercury from the silver filling, or from any metal, it will draw toxins from the mouth. I don't think the mouth has toxins, so you see, the problem, let's say, if we didn't talk about fluoride at all, and fluoride is a Schedule 6 poison, and it ages the entire body, it interferes with collagen production, it causes cancer. It's like a very fast way of aging a person to drink fluoridated water, you should just know.
And how fluoride
And
came
deadly.
about?
It's a byproduct of aluminum manufacturing,
Right. They didn't know what
it's
to
a
do
waste.
with it, it's a pure
Commercial
poison,
waste.
and they decided, what should we do with it? We'll add it to the water, we'll make money, we'll say it's good for people, and that's how fluoride started to be
Right,
part
it's
of water.
crazy. It's crazy. The toothpaste is totally toxic, causes cavities when people have fluoridated toothpaste, because basically, it's damaging the oral microbiome. The person needs a good microbiome, oral microbiome, to prevent cavities, balance pH of the mouth. And when a person bombs it out with fluoride, they're altering their oral microbiome, and they could be causing cavities. Besides that, it's damaging and gets absorbed by the mucosa of the whole, mouth. It's dangerous.
What do you use, coconut oil?
I like just salt water.
Salt water, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of things. I've made concoctions with coconut oil and, flavoring it with some peppermint oil and I've made concoctions. I just think it's not necessary though. I think the salt water is great.
And what if you have a wisdom tooth that's like in fact like impacting the on it's like
Well, impact teeth is a very big topic. The way people should have enough room for their teeth to grow in, it's a couple different things. First of all, people have to sleep with their mouth closed. Tongue has to rest on the roof of the mouth. People have to be eating enough raw and unprocessed foods. Breastfeeding the baby, basically proper tongue placement is very big because tongue is a very powerful muscle and improper tongue placement causes a lot of crooked teeth because the tongue is hanging low, the upper jaw is just not being developed properly and there's just not enough growth for the teeth. And it could move when people, it depends on the age and stuff, but so teeth are not supposed to be impacted, but they could be, yeah. Pulling it out is a very big question. First of all, the wisdom teeth are such an anchor to the face structure. It could almost cause like the face to fall. Besides, even if they're done properly with moving the ligament, it's such a serious support of the head. They're enormous. It's a crazy thing to take them out. I don't know how else to say it. Yeah. Was this any of this like very surprising or shocking? I know injecting sugar is crazy, no? I was really floored when I read that. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
You said to soak all the grains.
Yeah.
What about the wheat, if you're gonna grind wheat? Do you
Very good question.
soak it first?
It's a very good question. So we were dealing with this. What do? Do you need to sprout your grain before fermenting? So it's either soaking or fermenting. You see, this is what it is. The grain has to come in contact with water. When you're soaking a whole grain that's intact, the process is almost 12 hours because you're 12 to 18 hours because it's intact. So it takes a lot of time for it to break down the shell. When I buy my sack of spelt and I'm grinding it into flour and I put it in contact with water for 2 hours with the fermentation process, because it's so fine, the sourdough process is so much faster than soaking. It's either or. That water coming in contact with the grain is what makes it digestible, and when it's in a flour form, it's just much faster. So when I am not, let's say if I wanted to bake a cake, and it's not sourdough, the healthiest thing for me to be doing, which I don't always do, and I try to avoid making these kind of cakes, is to soak the grain, then dehydrate it so it's millable, that's a word, and then use that flour in my recipe. That was sprouted flour. That means I do that to my oats. I soak my oats, I then put it in my dehydrator, I then mill it in a coarse setting to make like a breakfast ball. Because I want to mill those oats, but I'm not fermenting them.
But what if someone doesn't have a dehydrator?
A dehydrator is just a nice tool. Then just if you don't have a dehydrator, stick to fermenting your grains. That's just, they have to come in contact with water. Or you'll just have mushy grains, like you could soak your oats and then just mash it and pulverize it. You'll have wet grain. So just put it in an Escalade food processor and mix it with your ingredients and it's wet batter. A dehydrator is a nice tool, but it's not essential. Essential for the kitchen is a water filter, so your kidneys aren't the filter. And number 2 is a grain mill.
What kind
I
of
think a
water?
pressure cooker is too. What?
What kind of water filter?
I recommend reverse osmosis for fluoride. I'm really unclear if there's fluoride here in Jerusalem because I sent a sample of water to a water lab and I did get fluoride, a third of the amount of the New York City water that I tested. But then when you look online and say they don't fluoridate their water, but I found fluoride on the report. So I don't know. You see, if there's no fluoride in the water, you don't need such extreme filtration.